Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by officially welcoming all of you guys to Wat Tung Yu. Sawadee Kap. Sawadee Kap. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here at the temple, and welcome to all of you guys that are joining us online. Today is our group learning program. This is a program that I've been teaching for 7 months, and today is the last class of that program, and we're going to be restarting it next Sunday from the very beginning, where each Sunday and Wednesday I get together with students here at the temple at 9 a.m., and then I also live stream as well. And then at 9 p.m., I also get together with students teaching the same class where I live stream at home. So no matter where you are in the world, you can get access to a live class, and then it's recorded as well. And what I do is I walk students through over a 7-month period, building up a life practice to help them move the mind to the enlightened mental state based on the original teachings of the Buddha. I use this book back here. There's a first book of the book series called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is the very first book that develops a foundation for you in the path to enlightenment. And you can get access to this book by downloading it for free from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed copies here by just reimbursing us. And then Amazon also has copies of these as well. It's an entire book series of 13 books. And we use the first book as the guide for this particular program, where each Sunday I share a teaching on a particular chapter in that book. And on the last day, like today, I'm teaching a content that actually isn't in the book. It's in some of the other books, but it's not in the first book. So what I've been doing over a 7-month period is teaching people how to move the mind to the enlightened mental state, where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, the boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. You notice that there's focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will blossom. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore because you've eliminated the conditions that are causing the bad mood. You've uprooted them out of the mind. So it takes time for an individual to gradually train their mind to get to that point, and you'll need the foundation of the teachings to be able to do that. So I have this program on Sundays where I do that, and then on Wednesdays I'm teaching as well. And then we have courses and retreats throughout the month and throughout the year. And we have other programs as well, but this is a great program for someone just getting started. So while I've been teaching students over the last 7 months about how to get to enlightenment, the topic for today is called the Five Hindrances and the Seven Factors of Enlightenment. This is where you're learning the 5 obstructions or obstacles that are going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. And then you're going to learn the solutions to those, which are the 7 factors of enlightenment. So all the other teachings that I've been sharing up to this point were how to get to enlightenment. And now at the very end of the program, I'm teaching students what is going to obstruct them or hinder them or block them from being able to get to enlightenment. The way that we start our classes is we start with some meditation. And the way that I do meditation is I start with some chanting. And Steve's handing out these chanting sheets where I chant in the Pali language. This is the language that the original source teachings of the Buddha are captured in the Pali language. So we chant these nowadays in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself, where you get awareness of the mind, awareness of the breath, kind of invigorate the mind a bit. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they did chanting as a way to remember his teachings, because everything that he taught was oral. So he had his students chanting every 2 weeks, where they would recite his teachings word for word for word for word. And this is how they committed them to memory, because the technology to write things down didn't exist in the region of the world where the Buddha was. It existed in China, but it hadn't made its way to that region of the world yet. So the language that he was using was oral. So the way that he helped people to remember, among other things, was to do chanting. So chanting, it isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer. There isn't anything mystical or magical about chanting. I suspect that the Buddha didn't even create these chants himself. If you read the English translations, there's a lot of respect and admiration and gratitude for the Buddha in these chants. And a Buddha has already eliminated their arrogance, their ego. Even an enlightened being has eliminated that. So they're not going to walk around, teaching people to chant things to them as a way to honor them and respect them. So I suspect his students created these either during his life or after his death. Because if you learned from a teacher who didn't want anything from you, didn't expect anything from you, and then they helped you to move from this anger and sadness and frustration to the peace and joy where your mind is permanently in that mental state, you'd probably have a lot of admiration and respect and appreciation for that person too. So I suspect his students created these. So you'll hear me chanting these as we ease into meditation, and you're welcome to chant along if you like. Then there's going to be a period of time where I'm just going to be guiding you in meditation and helping you understand how to meditate while we're actually meditating. Those of you guys here and everyone online, we can just all be meditating together. And then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet. I'm sure you'll hear the occasional dog barking, or maybe you'll hear a bird chirping. We have some people doing some work outside. You might hear a little bit of a sound here and there, but all these things are impermanent. It's not possible for you to be in permanent quietness. So if your mind's craving for it to be permanently quiet, during meditation, if you hear a sound, you might be annoyed or frustrated or agitated, but you can just remind yourself that these things are all impermanent, that the quietness is impermanent, but also that sound that you might hear is also impermanent. So we'll go through a period of time where we're all meditating together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting, the same exact chants that we went into the meditation with. We'll do those on the way out, so you can be chanting along with me if you like. In terms of positioning of the body for meditation, the Buddha taught 4 positions: seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. Oftentimes people are learning in the seated position, either on the floor, in a chair, or any kind of other way that you might like to sit. If you're on the floor, you might just have your legs lightly crossed, because if they're real tight, you'll kind of impede your circulation, and it'll be hard for you to potentially meditate. You'll notice pain in the body. Some people like to just do that lightly, just kind of cross your legs lightly, or put your legs off the mat, which gets the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and this will allow the circulation to flow more readily. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. And you could use this if you like, but it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. Everybody's body is a little bit different. Different people will find different things comfortable. So there's some other options for you. You could put your palms on your thighs, on your knees, your palms up. Some people like to just rest their hands and arms in their lap. And same thing for those of you guys in chairs. You might just sit with your feet flat on the floor, or maybe cross at the ankles. It's really up to you, whatever you find comfortable. And then the same thing with the hands and the arms. Just put them wherever you feel comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. It also helps you to breathe into the lungs and out, and kind of experiencing the entire breath. So by having your sternum up and your shoulders back, this will allow you to breathe in nice full breaths and be able to experience the entire breath during the meditation. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting. You're welcome to join along, and then I'll come back in with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Otang Mahakevanhang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath or the sensation of the air coming into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Mahakavandang Apivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I'd like to once again welcome all of you guys here at the temple and everyone joining us online. Welcome to those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. As I mentioned, today is our group learning program and we're studying the 5 hindrances today. But before we move into the topic that I have to share with you guys, which are the 5 obstructions or 5 hindrances that'll hinder you from experiencing enlightenment, I'd like to share with those of you guys that maybe this is your first time learning with me, something that I share with brand new students when they first start learning, is that you shouldn't believe anything related to the teachings of the Buddha. There's no beliefs in the teachings of the Buddha whatsoever. It's not about believe, and then hope something good happens when you die. That's not the way the Buddha taught. It's not about rules or commandments. The Buddha didn't teach the way the world should be, and if everybody follows these rules, the world will become peaceful. Instead, he's teaching you the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, then you'll navigate this world more wisely with understanding the natural laws. The Buddha taught the natural laws of existence. He taught to help you be able to awaken to the wisdom of that. And the way that you awaken to the wisdom of the natural laws is that you learn teachings, you investigate them, you examine them, you reflect on them to be able to independently verify them. You can independently verify every single thing that the Buddha taught. And then you can practice his teachings in order to train your mind and uproot certain pollutions that he discovered in the mind. So what you're doing is you're awakening to these natural laws so that you can understand the world that you live in. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you'll struggle, you'll have difficulties. That's what the anger and the sadness and the frustration and all those other discontent feelings are. The guilt, the shame, the fear, the loneliness, the boredom, the shyness, the resentment, the agitation, the annoyance, the stress, the anxiety. This is all because because the mind's struggling and having difficulties because it has certain pollutions in the mind, and it doesn't understand the wisdom of how to train the mind in order to experience the freedom and liberation from these feelings. So these natural laws that the Buddha taught, they're affecting everybody, whether you're aware of them or not. And when you lack wisdom of these natural laws, you're going to naturally make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results in your life. But when you gain wisdom of these natural laws, you'll make wiser decisions that produce wholesome results. And the same thing happened when you were learning the natural law of gravity, that it was affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And when we were first growing up, we really struggled and had difficulties with this natural law. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we broke open our knees, we broke our toys. We had all kinds of difficulties with the natural law of gravity. And it affected us whether we were aware of it or not. There was no being overseeing this natural law. Nobody's turning it on or turning it off. It just exists. And then because of our lack of wisdom of this natural law of gravity, we made unwise decisions that produced unwholesome results in our life. But slowly but surely, we gradually learned about this natural law. And then as we awoke to that wisdom, we made wiser decisions that produced wholesome results for us. And now we're at the point where we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can ride motorbikes, we can get on airplanes and travel all over the world. We learned things. We started to tie our shoes a little bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we walked. As children, we stopped being so giddy and bouncing around all the time and falling down. So we started making wiser decisions. Even me at this point, I put this glass of water behind me because I know if I put it in front of me, I'll have a tendency to knock it over. So nobody told me to put this water behind me. Nobody taught that to me. But with the wisdom of the natural law of gravity, you just learn these things and you decide that this is a wise thing to do. So you'll naturally make wiser decisions when you understand the natural law of gravity or all the other natural laws too. So on this path to enlightenment, when we talk about awakening to enlightenment and getting to this peace and joy, it's to awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, this cause and effect or this action and result, helping you to understand not how the world should be, but how the world is. The Buddha is describing these natural laws, and then you're invited to be able to learn those on your own independent journey. The teachings of the Buddha, there's nobody here to convince you to believe something. There's nobody here to force you or control you to do anything. It's your journey to enlightenment. It's up to you to gather the wisdom by learning the teachings, by reflecting on those and practicing them. And this is accomplished through gradual training of the mind, through gradual practice of the teachings to uproot the pollutions of the mind, and then you'll experience gradual progress. And you'll know that your mind's getting closer and closer to enlightenment because you know the situations where you normally get angry and frustrated and agitated and all these other discontent feelings that you experience. You know those situations and you try to avoid them the best you can, but you can't. Because you can't control what the world does. All you can do is control your own mind. So if you can train your mind to uproot these pollutions of the mind, you can get to a point where you're experiencing the freedom and liberation and the peace. And as you're seeing your mind becoming more and more peaceful, because you know in the situations where your mind is typically agitated and annoyed, but you see that your mind is more peaceful and joyful, and you've been training your mind in these teachings, you'll know that it's these teachings that are leading to that improved condition of mind. So the teachings of the Buddha, again, they're not about believe, and hope something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning now. You're reflecting on the teachings now to independently verify them. And you're practicing them now to be able to uproot the pollution out of your mind. And because of that, you see the results now, that you see your mind becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful in this life. So as I share the teachings with you today, it's important that you don't believe anything that I say, that you don't believe the books that I share, that you don't believe any teachings related to the teachings of the Buddha. But as I'm sharing teachings with you, you learn them, you start to reflect on them through your own direct experiences, thinking about what I'm explaining, does this represent what it is that you're experiencing in life? And then you can start practicing the teachings. So as you're learning the teachings and I'm sharing the different examples with you and I'm sharing with you what these different pollutions are in the mind, you'll be able to see what these pollutions are that the Buddha discovered. You can understand the symptoms that you experience because of this. You can understand how to uproot these out of the mind, applying the solution. And then you can see the truth for yourself that as you implement these solutions, that your mind's becoming more and more peaceful. And as we go in our class today, you can ask any and all questions that you like. For those those of you guys here at the temple, we have microphones in the white bowl in front of the camera. If you could just get one of those and you can share them around. We have plenty of microphones. You can even keep it with you as you're asking questions because there might be someone around you that needs it. There's a gray button on the front. You just press it and the lights come on. You just wait like a second or two, hold it up to your chin, and then you'll be able to talk, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online too because we have various people joining us online. And then for those of you guys in Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comment section. I'll be able to see that. And then if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand. You can open up your microphone and we can hear you here at the temple. So as you guys have questions, feel free to let me know. Also, for those of you guys that are here at the temple, if this is your first time here, we have a bathroom in the very back of the room, the very last door on the right. You're welcome to get up and use it at any time. Feel free to come and go as you please. We even have bathrooms outside the classroom. If you go outside, you can follow the main signs around to the main bathroom of the temple. And we even have water here that is provided by our students that you're welcome to help yourself to and make yourself comfortable and feel at home. So the first thing to show you here related to the five hindrances is the words of the Buddha. The Buddha talks about the five hindrances in different places in his teachings, but what I like to do in these foundational programs is show you some of the words of the Buddha so that you can understand what he actually taught. And this entire book series is all based on the words of the Buddha. So if you're interested in learning the original teachings of the Buddha, it's here. It's available to you at no cost. You can get access to it from our website by downloading the books. You can take those and go print them. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for our printing cost, or you can order them on Amazon. The original teachings of the Buddha are in 45 large volumes of books. They're about this thick. I guess that's about maybe 10 centimeters or about 4 or 5 inches thick. And there are 45 volumes of books. But this book series has consolidated it. So it's a manageable, digestible content that you can actually learn the original teachings of the Buddha. And at different times, he teaches these five hindrances because you need to know what are these obstructions. You need to know the solutions to them. So I like to share the original words of the Buddha so that you have confidence that what I'm sharing with you is from the Buddha. But then again, you don't believe that. You learn it, you reflect on it, and you practice it to be able to see the truth for yourself. So here the Buddha is saying, monks, there are these five hindrances. What five? The hindrance of sensual desire, the hindrance of ill will, the hindrance of complacency, the hindrance of restlessness and worry, the hindrance of doubt. These are the five hindrances. This Noble Eightfold Path is to be developed for direct knowledge or experience of these five hindrances, for the full understanding of them, for their complete destruction, for their abandoning. And this reference will take you back to the original source teachings and the original Pali Canon to be able to see that indeed this is actually from the Buddha, from the original Pali Canon. So here he's just kind of mentioning the five hindrances, and he's saying that it's the Eightfold Path that is going to solve that for you. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and as you're learning that, a lot of his other teachings plug into this Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching. If you're interested in getting to enlightenment, you would need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards, and you would need to learn it based on the original words of the Buddha. If you've been exposed to the Eightfold Path in other environments, but you haven't seen the original words of the Buddha, then you haven't yet learned the Eightfold Path in enough detail that's going to lead to your enlightenment. So in this particular program and other programs that I teach, I share the Eightfold Path using the original words of the Buddha, and then I teach it to students to be able to help them implement it into their life and develop a life practice. The Eightfold Path is your life practice. If you can think about the Eightfold Path like a speaker system, and you have 8 dials, and you're trying to dial these 8 dials in closer and closer, and you get a better and better quality sound out of your speakers, the same thing is true about your mind. As you learn the Eightfold Path and you dial this into your life closer and closer, you get a better and better quality mind, where your mind experiences the peace and the joy, the focus, the concentration, the clarity. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships blossom because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships any longer. As I mentioned, you're not even in a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment, that your mind's always in a good mood, and you gradually train the mind towards that. But it's these 5 hindrances that are going to block you or obstruct you from being able to get to enlightenment. So I'm going to teach you to these 5 hindrances, and I'm going to teach you the solutions to them. While the Eightfold Path is a general teaching, it's very detailed, it's very specific, and that is the path to enlightenment. In terms of the 5 hindrances, it's a general teaching that's going to help you to understand the 5 hindrances and eliminate them. But the Buddha teaches other teachings, and he describes them in other teachings, how they immediately and kind of almost like a scalpel go in and remove these 5 hindrances. So here he's just talking about the 5 hindrances in general, and he's talking about the solution in general, but there's other places where he talks about them in more detail and how to specifically uproot them from the mind. So that's what I'm going to share with you, because the students who have learned in this program with me over the 7-month period, they would have learned the Eightfold Path at different times. And then the different courses and retreats that I share, I teach the Eightfold Path. And I realize some of you guys haven't learned that with me or with the original words of the Buddha. And that's okay, because I have books, I have videos, I have podcasts, I have other courses and retreats and programs. And we're going to be restarting this program from the very beginning next week, so you can learn the Eightfold Path, if that's something that you're interested in doing, to eliminate your anger and sadness and all those other discontent feelings. But just understand that the Eightfold Path is something that you're going to need to know in order to fully eradicate these 5 hindrances, in addition to the things that I'm going to share with you today. So just kind of in general, talking about what the 5 hindrances are before we move into talking about them specifically. The 5 hindrances have similarities to what's called the 10 fetters. The Buddha has this layering effect. The way that he teaches kind of in these layers, where he kind of introduces you to something and kind of helps you understand it. Then he goes a bit deeper, then he goes a bit deeper. So usually when you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment, you learn something called the 4 Noble Truths. And you need to learn that in a way that you understand, not just the general statements. And as you learn the 4 Noble Truths, you understand the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that, the elimination of it, and the path forward. He explains to you essentially that your mind is causing your own discontent feelings. Usually in the unenlightened state, you think that someone else is causing your anger. Somebody else is frustrating you or agitating you or annoying you. Or maybe this situation is annoying you. But it's actually your own mind that's causing these feelings. And this is why you can eliminate them. It's something called craving, desire, attachment. We're going to be talking about that a bit today with the 5 hindrances. So the Buddha teaches you in the 4 Noble Truths these 4 simple statements of what is the problem in the unenlightened mind, what is the cause of that problem, what is the elimination of it, and what is the path forward. And that's something that you would need to learn. Then you go deeper and you understand the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is a deeper teaching. It's a broadening your understanding of what the real problem is in the unenlightened mind and helping you to deepen that understanding. But then you go deeper into what's called the 10 fetters. A fetter during ancient times was a shackle, a chain, and a ball that's around your ankle that keeps you trapped like a prisoner. That a fetter is what they would use to keep prisoners confined to a certain area. Nowadays, we put people in jail cells typically, but during ancient times, they would put this fetter on your leg and keep you trapped in a particular area. So it's a shackle, a chain, and a ball. So the Buddha described these 10 pollutions of mind as fetters. The 10 fetters, or taints, or defilements, or pollutions of mind, because this is what's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state, continuing to experience the anger, the sadness, the frustration, and all those other discontent feelings. So you can eliminate these 10 fetters and these pollutions from the mind, and you'll see the peace and the joy coming into the mind. And this is why the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind shines through. So part of your journey on the path to enlightenment, you're learning about these 10 fetters. All of his teachings, whether it's the Eightfold Path or the 5 precepts or the meditation training or anything else that he teaches, is working to eliminate these fetters in one way or another. And he doesn't necessarily tell you that in each one of the teachings when he's sharing the meditation with you or the Eightfold Path with you. He's just teaching you the teachings. But then later, as you get deeper into the teachings, you start to learn how these individual teachings are actually helping you to eliminate these 10 pollutions. And as you do, that's where you see the peace and the joy coming into the mind. So you're going to see this similarity between some of the 5 hindrances in the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters is much more detailed, but the 5 hindrances, 4 of the 5 hindrances are actually fetters as well. But there's one in there that's not an actual fetter. So these are the 5 obstructions or the 5 hindrances that are going to hinder somebody from getting to enlightenment. So it's through learning and practicing the Eightfold Path while eliminating the 10 fetters to include using the 7 factors of enlightenment that's going to remove these these 5 hindrances. So I'm going to teach you the 7 factors of enlightenment here in a moment, because in the group learning program, I've mentioned the 7 factors of enlightenment, but I haven't really taught it. I kind of wait till the end here to teach the 7 factors of enlightenment, because those are the remedies that are going to surgically go in and almost remove these 5 hindrances almost surgically. Gautama Buddha's teachings oftentimes point to each other, either in direct ways or indirect ways. You can see this in the 5 hindrances and the 10 fetters, but you can also see this in other teachings too, where the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, these things are all interconnected to each other. They're layering on top of each other. So you'll see that also here with the 5 hindrances and the 10 fetters. There's this struggles, and these 5 hindrances are struggles and impediments to the path to enlightenment. By looking at the individual hindrances, you can then see what's actually obstructing you, because you're going to experience these 5 hindrances on your journey to enlightenment. If you're not experiencing them now, it's only a matter of time before they come up in your mind. And now if you understand the solutions, at least at an introductory level, you'll be alerted to those hindrances, and then you'll be able to see that this is hindering you or blocking you or obstructing you from experiencing more peace and more joy in the mind. So you can remove these and actually produce progress on the path to enlightenment. So let's understand the 7 factors of enlightenment, because these are the solutions that I'm going to be talking about later when we talk about the 5 hindrances. So understanding these, you'll understand the solutions to the 5 hindrances when we get to that. So there's these 7 factors of enlightenment. Some people think that based on the name, that this is to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. That's not the case. The 7 factors of enlightenment, these are tools to go in and fine-tune the mind. If you can think about like a big piece of log, like a raw piece of wood, and you're trying to create a sculpture, and you're trying to create this beautiful sculpture, when you first start working on this sculpture, you're probably going to use a hatchet or an axe to chunk off big chunks of wood. And then as you get those big chunks of wood off, you're going to use other tools besides an axe, besides a hatchet, to go in and actually use different tools to kind of refine this sculpture that you're making. If you're making a picture or an image of out of this log of a human being, you're going to maybe go in with eventually an X-Acto knife or a razor blade and put in the kind of wrinkles and the creases around the eyes or other parts of the face. You're going to need a really fine tool to go in and carve those wrinkles into the face, where initially you're just chunking off big chunks of wood to kind of whittle this down to make it manageable, so that then you can go in and use a fine tool to go in and fine-tune your sculpture. The same thing is true when you're training your mind. You're working to become this better and better and better human being, functioning more and more as a wise human being. And initially, when you first get on the path to enlightenment, you're using tools like the Eightfold Path and meditation training. These big chunks of wood are coming off. We call the Eightfold Path the path to enlightenment, but there's individual steps like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So what you're chucking off, this big chunk of wood, is you're chucking off wrong view. You're chucking off, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration, kind of getting that out of this piece of wood. But then eventually you're going to come in with the 7 factors of enlightenment to fine-tune the mind. These are tools to fine-tune the mind. So this first factor of enlightenment is called mindfulness. And this is the same mindfulness that the Buddha references in the Eightfold Path, because of this layering effect that you'll see that teachings point to each other. At different collections of his teachings, he will layer in different teachings. So here, in order to practice the 7 factors of mindfulness, you need to have mindfulness. the 7 factors of enlightenment, you need to have the mindfulness. The mindfulness is the awareness of mind. This is what you would like to be practicing at all times. It's the same mindfulness that you see in the Eightfold Path. So if you studied the Eightfold Path, you might have studied the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where initially what I teach students when they're first getting started is to practice mindfulness. You need awareness of the mind, because in the unenlightened state, you're typically going through the world, plowing through the world, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. You're not really aware of what's going on in your own mind. You're having various thoughts, various feelings, not even aware of what's necessarily going on. So initially, you're working to just develop awareness of the mind, because you like to be aware what's in the mind, because you need to purify the mind to be able to get to this peace and this joy of the enlightened mental state. So initially, you're just looking to develop awareness of the mind. But more and more, as you're developing your meditation practice and you're developing mindfulness outside of meditation, you like to develop what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. What this is helping you to develop 4 things that you need to be aware of in order to purify the mind. It's called the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. What the Buddha is teaching you in the 4 foundations of mindfulness is the life cycle that your discontentedness is going to go through. If you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind, which is this longing, yearning, this chasing after the objects of your affection, where you want things to be a certain way, if you get what you want, you will get happy. You will get excited or elated or thrilled or euphoria. You'll get pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want in the mind, what you expect, what you're longing and yearning for, you'll get painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, some other painful feeling, maybe guilt or shame or fear or stress or anxiety. These are very painful for the mind to experience. And this is all coming from the mind's craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. And then there's these neither painful nor pleasant feelings that the mind experiences. These are things that I taught at other times during this program. Well, with that craving, desire, attachment in the mind, when you experience contact through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your body, and your mind, this is called the 6 sense spaces. When you experience contact, based on your craving, if you see something that you agree with, you'll get pleasant feelings. But if you see something that you disagree with, you'll get painful feelings. If you hear something that you agree with, you'll get pleasant feelings. But if you hear something you disagree with, you'll get painful feelings. And it's the same thing for all these senses, whether it's an odor, a flavor, something coming in contact with the body, or thoughts and ideas in the mind itself. Agreeable things based on your cravings, you will get pleasant feelings. Disagreeable things based on your cravings, you'll get painful feelings. So your mindfulness is there to be aware of this life cycle of what's going to be happening, that because of your cravings, before your mind gets angry or frustrated or some other feeling, you're going to experience bodily sensations. If you've ever noticed, before you get angry, you might feel this tingling in the body. You might feel tightening in the chest. You might feel pain in the heart. You might feel tightening in your throat. You might feel heat in your face. You might feel pressure in the skull. This is an early warning system that the Buddha is explaining to you that you're about to get angry. You haven't got angry yet. The mind isn't angry. The mind isn't frustrated, but it's about to. And this is an early warning system that you can develop with mindfulness to be aware that this is occurring. And you can cut this off and let it go with your effort that you learn through meditation to cut off and let go of anything that's arising. When your mind's moving off the breath in meditation, you're cutting that off and letting it go. So now when you notice the bodily sensations with your mindfulness, you can cut that off and let it go, preserving your mind, protecting your mind so your mind doesn't get angry or frustrated. Because it's like a boat. If you took a boat from Canada to the UK, for example, and you're out in the middle of the ocean, you'd like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once the water comes in, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get rid of this water. So if you allow this anger to come into the mind, or this frustration or sadness or loneliness or boredom or guilt or shame or fear, if you allow it to come into the mind, you've got to now deal with it. So what the Buddha teaches you is that as a bodily sensation, you cut it off and let it go. You're not suppressing the feelings. Sometimes that's what people think when they hear this. They think that you're suppressing the feelings. That's not what you're doing. You're actually cutting it off before it ever becomes a feeling. If you can catch it as a bodily sensation and cut it off, you're catching it before it even becomes a feeling. It's just a bodily sensation. But if you miss it as a bodily sensation, it's going to become a feeling in the mind. That's the second foundation of mindfulness. Now the mind's angry. Now the mind's frustrated. And you can cut it off and let it go there too. If you don't, it's then going to move to the third step, which is it's going to affect the condition of your mind. Have you ever been angry for like a day or two, or like a week or two, or agitated or annoyed? Of course you have, right? Of course you have, because you didn't know about what the Buddha is teaching you, to cut this off as a bodily sensation, and if you miss it there, to cut it off as a feeling. So now for a few hours, for a few days, for a week or two, you've been agitated, you've been annoyed. The condition of your mind has been generally agitated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. And now if you allow that to continue and persist, it's going to feed what's called a mental object. This is the fourth foundation of mindfulness. The mental objects are deeply rooted containers in the mind. And that's what these 5 hindrances are. They're mental objects. And the 10 fetters, they're mental objects. What a mental object is like a mental state that the mind is having this deeply rooted container. Like, for example, you're going to learn about ill will today. Your mind has this deeply rooted container, this mental object called ill will. Right now, you don't have any anger or hatred that's arising in your mind, but you have this container of ill will, this deeply rooted container, this mental object, that if you go outside and you experience something that you don't agree with, this mental object can be triggered, and now that ill will arises in the mind. So right now, it's not arisen, but there's this container, this deeply rooted container called a mental object that's in the mind that can be triggered. So if you can cut off any arising discontentedness as a bodily sensation, you can preserve your mind that it doesn't then become a feeling. And if you can cut it off there, if you've missed it as a bodily sensation, if you can cut it off as a feeling, then you've preserved the mind that you don't experience the condition of the mind for several hours, days, or weeks, feeling agitated or annoyed. But then all the while, you're working to uproot these mental objects and get them out of the mind. This is the purification of the mind, that you're eliminating these mental objects, and namely these 5 hindrances and the 10 fetters. These are the mental objects that you're eliminating to purify the mind. So you need to practice mindfulness or awareness of mind, where you can develop awareness of these 4 things: the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and those mental objects. And this is something that somebody learns and gets deeper and deeper with as they go through a program and they learn and develop their life practice the way that I teach. It's not something that you're going to necessarily understand or be able to practice at the snap of a finger. You need to gradually train the mind, gradually practice this, and gradually build it up. When you first start with mindfulness, I suggest students just practice awareness of mind, where you're just aware. Is the mind happy? Is the mind sad? Is the mind frustrated? Is it shy? Is it resentful? Is it bitter? Is it harsh? What's going on in the mind? Start developing that awareness, where all throughout your day, you have awareness of what's going on in the mind. But then deeper and deeper, as you practice meditation, the one that we did today, the breathing mindfulness meditation, you'll develop those 4 foundations of mindfulness, where more and more you'll get clued into those 4 things that are occurring. So mindfulness needs to be practiced all the time. It's always useful. But then if your mind is sluggish or dull or lethargic, you would like to practice the enlightenment factor investigation, energy, and joy. This is what's going to uplift the mind and bring it out of that sluggish, dull, and lethargic condition. What investigation is where you investigate the teachings of the Buddha. You examine them, not believing them, but you do deep study. You keenly are interested in studying the teachings, because when your mind's dull and lethargic and complacent, that's the last thing the mind wants to do. It's not interested in picking up a book, not interested in coming to the temple, not interested in talking to a teacher to get help. The mind's dull and lethargic and complacent. So you're going to need to apply the effort to arise this factor of investigation, where you have this willingness and interest to study and investigate the teachings. Because as you investigate teachings, that's what's going to give you the insight and the wisdom to be able to eradicate these pollutions from the mind. So when your mind's dull and complacent, you bring in the investigation. And this is going to spring up the energy in the mind, because you're going to be getting the answers to what's going on with the mind and how to improve the condition of the mind. So you'll notice this energy arising, this effort, determination, ambition, initiative, motivation, this vigor, this enthusiasm, the willingness to do something, to take initiative and do something. That energy will spring up in the mind, bringing the mind out of that dull, complacent state. Then you'll notice this joy that comes into the mind, where the mind is pleased and delighted, not associated with any specific object, because what you're going to hear me talk about in a moment is about conditioned feelings. This is what you would like to eliminate and eradicate from the mind. You would like to get to the unconditioned mental qualities where the mind can just be joyful all the time as an unconditioned mental state. So as you're practicing investigation, energy, and joy, this is what's going to arise, this energy and this joy, where it's taking your mind out of the dull, lethargic state and bringing the mind more to the middle. When your mind's excited or elated, you would like to calm that down, because the mind's discontent in that situation. Have you ever been so excited you like tripped and fell, or you broke something because you're so excited? This is because the mind's shaken up. It's discontent. So you'd like to bring the mind down to the calmness. And those first couple, those 2, 3, and 4, investigation, energy, and joy, is to lift it out of the complacency, the dullness. But these next 3 are to bring the mind out of that excited state, that elated state, and bring it down to calmness, where now you can maintain your calmness. This is the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. You're going to need to apply the effort to arise these. Whenever you notice with your mindfulness that your mind is excited or elated, you're going to need to bring in the tranquility, which is the relaxed, steady, stable, peaceful, and stillness of mind. And then you're going to need to bring in this concentration, where there's mental alertness, attentiveness, the ability to give your attention to a single thought or singleness of mind, rather than bouncing around from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. So focus and concentration. And then you bring in the equanimity, which is the mental calmness and composure, even in a difficult situation, where the mind can be calm and collected. Because being in that excited, elated state isn't going to produce the ability to access your wisdom and make wise decisions. If your mind is uncalm, you're not going to have mindfulness or awareness of mind, and you're not going to have concentration, and therefore you're not going to be able to access your wisdom. You're going to make unwise decisions that produces unwholesome results. So for example, if you got a phone call that your mom was in a terrible car accident and she's in the back of an ambulance making her way to the hospital, you might get really shaken up by that. It's not your love that's causing that. Love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. What's causing your mind to be shaken up is the craving, the desire, the attachment, wanting mom to be permanently healthy, longing, yearning, not realizing that mom is impermanent. So you might grab your car keys in this uncommon, unsettled state, race across town. You might get in a car accident yourself on the way. But at the very least, when you show up to the hospital and the doctors and the nurses are talking to you, you're going to find it very difficult to comprehend what it is that they're sharing, because your mind's all shaken up, and you're going to have a very difficult time making wise decisions. It's going to help mom to improve her health and get the services that she needs and the procedures that she needs to get healthy. So what you would like to do is, in difficult situations, or if your mind's excited or elated, you'd like to bring in the calmness and the composure, where with your mind being calm, you can have awareness of mind or mindfulness. You can have concentration, and then you can access your wisdom, because you know mom's in the back of that ambulance. She's with emergency medical technicians. She's in the best place she can be, and she's about to show up to a hospital, the very best hands. You racing across town isn't going to help anything. So you just take your time and you make your way to the hospital, keeping your mind calm, so that then when you show up to the hospital, you can listen to the doctors, you can listen to the nurses, understand what they have to say, and now you can start making wise decisions that's going to help her. So you having your mind in a calm state is highly advantageous to you. And it's not just in these kinds of situations, but when you're in business, when you're in a business meeting and you're talking to your boss, or you're talking to a project team, or maybe you are a boss and you're talking to your employees, or maybe you're at home and you're talking to your family. You'd like to be able to maintain your calmness and composure, because this is going to allow you to then access your wisdom and make wise decisions in life to produce wholesome results. So these are the 7 factors of enlightenment, where the Buddha talks about practicing mindfulness all the time, from the moment you're waking up until all day long, until you're gradually going to sleep at night. You need to practice mindfulness or awareness of mind. And then wherever you see the mind being dull or lethargic, you would like to lift that up with investigation, energy, and joy. And where you see the mind excited or elated or bouncing off the wall, you like to calm that down with tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And that's what's going to help you to be in the middle. And now more and more, as you train your mind to be in the middle, it'll just stay there all the time. That on your way to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice these to lift the mind up and to bring the mind down into the middle. It's kind of like if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you were grinding this back and forth. When you first start this, it's going to bounce around quite a bit because there's no groove yet for the steel rod to be in. But as you grind this steel back and forth, you're going to get more and more of a groove in the wood. And it's going to bounce out occasionally, but you're going to know it and you'll be able to easily bring it back. But more and more, as you grind this steel rod back and forth, you get this nice groove in the wood, and it won't pop out anymore because there's a deep groove in the wood. Your mind is the same way. The more that you notice with your mindfulness that your mind's not in the middle and you can pull it back to the middle, more and more your mind will just stay there all the time. And you can stay focused and concentrated. You can have clarity of mind and you can have deep memory. But if you don't train your mind this way, if you just allow it to be undisciplined and untrained and just run around the world and be all upset and uncalm and frustrated and agitated, you don't have control. You don't have discipline of your mind. So it's going to just be frolicking around like a wild animal. You would like to tame the mind and bring it into the middle, much like this steel rod. And the more that you keep it in the middle, you get a deeper and deeper and deeper groove, and your mind will just stay there all the time. So it's these 7 factors of enlightenment that are going to help you do this. And we're going to apply these to the 5 hindrances when I teach you the 5 hindrances. But before we do that, I would like to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on anything I've been sharing so far. Remember, here at the temple, you can use the microphones. And those of you guys online, you can use the comment section of YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So do you guys have any questions here? Anybody online? Yes, ma'am.
Working. It's very interesting to understand the different stages of mind. I'm wondering, there are some therapeutical ways that they say that you need to feel your feelings and put everything away when you're either feeling or sad or super happy. And what would be the difference of feeling those feelings and let it out, or maybe when you're meditating and suppress it and then it comes back to you?
Okay. So nothing in the teachings of the Buddha are about suppressing feelings. That would be to bury it. Instead, what you're doing is you're uprooting the causes and conditions that are producing it. What's producing these discontent feelings of sadness, anger, frustration, and all these others is something called craving, desire, attachment. This is the longing, the yearning. This is where the mind wants things to be a certain way. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. So for example, you wake up in the morning, you see it's sunny outside. You're like, so happy, it's sunny outside. Yes, I'm going to go play with my friends. It's going to be so fun to go hiking. And now you go take a shower and you come out and it's raining. And you're like, oh man, it's raining. Now you're frustrated and sad or irritated. This is because the mind formed what's called a conditioned feeling. That based on the condition of the sun, I am now going to be happy. But the problem with that is that the sun is not permanent. It is impermanent. So that means your happiness is impermanent too. In your mind, when that condition changes from sun to rain, Now you're in the painful feelings, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, or some other feeling. So the mind's being allowed to form a conditioned feeling. This is what the Western medicine and therapy and people aren't understanding, is that as long as you allow the mind to experience a conditioned feeling, it's going to keep doing that over and over and over again. If it's not the sun, it's your bank account. If your bank account is this balance, you'll be happy. But if it's this balance, you'll be sad. If mom and dad do this, I'll be happy. If mom and dad do this, I'll be angry and frustrated and bitter and harsh and hostile. If brothers and sisters do this, I'll be happy. If they do that, I'll be angry and sad and frustrated. And then you end up damaging your relationships through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, because the mind's misunderstanding the problem. The mind in the unenlightened state thinks the problem's external. It thinks that mom and dad or brothers and sisters or friends or coworkers are causing the mind to be angry or causing you to be frustrated. So what the mind will do is it'll push these people away. It'll push the people away, or it'll push the situation away. This is called aversion. And the mind thinks that it's solving the problem. But you're not solving the problem, because you just get angry or irritated or annoyed about something else. If that's the real problem, when you push them out of your life, you will be peaceful for the rest of your life. But that's not the real problem. That's not the real cause. Or the second thing that'll happen is when you misunderstand the problem, you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile towards people through your intentions, speech, and actions. And now you'll damage your relationships, and people will move out of your life. They'll leave out of your life. Or the third thing that you'll do is you'll put your expectations on people and try to control them to do things your way. Because the mind thinks, if I can just get my cravings fulfilled, I'll get those pleasant feelings. But you can't get your cravings fulfilled permanently. It's just not possible. So as long as you allow the mind to experience these conditioned feelings based on its cravings, desires, attachments, I want this, and when I get this, I'll be happy, and when I don't get that, I'll be sad. As long as you keep allowing the mind to do that, form these conditioned feelings, then you're going to keep experiencing the up and down and up and down and up and down. So with your mindfulness or awareness of mind, when you notice the bodily sensations coming where the mind is about to get this conditioned feeling, what the Buddha teaches you is cut it off and let it go. So you don't allow the mind to form that conditioned feeling. You basically retrain the mind. You rewire the mind to no longer base its inner feelings on some condition. So now in the enlightened mind, and as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, you're already happy before you ever woke up. And now you look outside and you're like, sweet, it's sunny. Let's go outside and go hiking. I'm going to call my friends. We've been interested to go to that trail for a long time. Let's go hiking and play outside. So now you're like, I'm going to go take a shower. And you go take a shower, and then you come out and you see it's raining. It's like, okay, well, it's raining, so that means we can't go outside. So maybe I'll invite them over for dinner. I'll cook them food. Maybe we'll go to the mall, watch a movie. Maybe I'll just stay home and read a book, right? Because you understand that the sun is impermanent, and you didn't base your inner feelings on the sun. So when it changed, you can maintain your joy. You can maintain your peacefulness. But if you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, and you're longing and yearning, and you're allowing this conditioned feeling to exist, then you're not going to be able to experience that peace and joy. So not only do you need to cut off the painful feelings as a bodily sensation, but even the conditioned pleasant feelings, that when you notice the excitement that's coming, you got to cut that off and let it go. Because as long as you hold on to temporary happiness, you'll never get to the permanent happiness, the permanent joy, where the mind can just always be there in an unconditioned mental state. Because over here, as your expectations grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, the amount of time that you can be happy becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is why this misunderstanding in the world, you see the world's becoming more and more frustrated, more and more angry, more and more problems in the world. People are getting so upset and so discontent about some of the most minor things. People in traffic, they just get angry and bitter and harsh, or you do one little thing that somebody doesn't particularly want you to do, and they get angry and bitter and harsh. And what people are trying to do is go around and follow these rules. And if we all follow these rules, then people won't get angry. But you can't follow rules and get to peacefulness and joy. Or people are thinking that you need to experience the feeling, and then when you experience it, then somehow that's going to be better for you. But the problem is that your mind's still forming that conditioned feeling. You've got to let it go. You've got to break it up and eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing it. Then you can get liberated from it. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even experience any arising of any discontentedness. There's no anger that arises. It's physically impossible for an enlightened mind to become angry. You just can't do it because the causes and conditions that are producing it have been eliminated. So in our society, in our cultures, we don't understand this. And this is one of the reasons why I teach, is because I come from a Western culture and I know there's big misunderstandings there. And by me sharing these teachings in English, it'll help people to understand how to get to this peace and joy that is permanent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Every time someone asks a question, the answer isn't that long, by the way, but that was a question that I needed to really explain really thoroughly for you.
I think my question relates to her question.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes sometimes people in the Westers talk about toxic positivity. Like, what would the Buddha or you think about positive get over it? This will pass. This is, like, I get it. Craving, desires, attachments, impermanence. But when you're feeling something and then it is affecting you mentally, physically, emotionally, and someone's telling, oh, this is impermanence. Oh, this is, like, don't cry. Oh, don't feel it. Or, oh, okay, it will pass. Like, be positive, smile, become mindful. Someone in the Western would be like, oh, this is toxic positivity.
Is that a word now? Toxic positivity? Is that what that's called? I haven't heard that word, but I understand what you're saying to me.
Okay.
So what I hear there is what the person's saying is redirect your mind, which is really good. It's really helpful for you. If you're noticing that the mind's agitated or annoyed, because on your way to enlightenment, you can intellectually understand what I'm sharing with you. I think you probably intellectually understand a little bit about what I'm sharing, but to actually do it in daily life, it's really challenging if you haven't built your practice yet. You need to build this meditation practice and your daily practice in daily life of this Eightfold Path so you can understand something intellectually, like, cut off the feeling before it becomes a feeling as a bodily sensation. You might intellectually start to understand that, but to actually be able to do it, it takes training, it takes practice to be able to accomplish that. But so in the process, redirecting the mind is really good. So say, like, you're in traffic and say somebody cuts you off in traffic and you start noticing the frustration arising, and now you're like stopped at a red light. Somebody cut you off and you're stopped at the red light. Well, instead of just sitting there looking at the license plate of the guy like going away or the girl going away, and like, why'd you cut me off? This was mine. Instead of that, just look somewhere else. Like, oh, look at those plants. Those are some beautiful plants over there. Look at the sky. Oh, wow, those clouds look pretty interesting. You need to redirect the mind to cut it off and let it go. Sitting and dwelling in that frustration isn't actually helping. So to do the things that it sounds like people have recommended to you, that's to redirect the mind and take it in an opposite direction. And more the mind will get disciplined where it can cut off and let go as either a bodily sensation or a feeling. But you'd like to get to the point where you cut it off as a bodily sensation, but that takes quite a while to train the mind to get to that point. So on your way to enlightenment, you're going to experience some anger and frustration and agitation and these other feelings. But more and more, you get more and more disciplined to be able to cut it off as a bodily sensation. And part of that is redirecting the mind. So for example, if you're watching the news and you're seeing whatever's going on in the news and you're noticing the frustration coming up, rather than sit there and dwell in that frustration, just get angry and just keep watching the news, it's better to cut off the news and go for a walk, go outside. That's redirecting the mind rather than keep taking in the content that's triggering your craving. Rather than sit there and keep watching it and dwelling in those frustration, that's just moving from you missed it as a bodily sensation. There's the feeling in the mind now. Now it's going to start affecting the condition of the mind, and it's going to feed that mental object. So if you don't notice it until it becomes a feeling, okay, that's fine. At least you notice it with your mindfulness. Turn off the TV, go outside, go for a walk, go for a bike ride. But more and more, you'd like to cut it off as a bodily sensation. And that's where you get real discipline of the mind. By the time you start noticing that the bodily sensations and you can cut it off and let it go there, you're very close to enlightenment. Within 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, you will most likely be experiencing enlightenment where your mind's permanently peaceful and joyful, because now you've developed your mindfulness so well that you can spot it as a bodily sensation, and you're able to cut it off and let it go there as a bodily sensation. But in the meantime, you're going to experience some of these feelings and the condition of your mind. But the more you refine your mindfulness, you'll be able to catch it sooner and sooner and cut it back. It's kind of like a wild bush. If you have a wild bush growing, you would like to cut it back and 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 cut it back. And eventually you uproot it out of the ground, and then it won't ever grow back. So while we say it's cut it off and let it go, it's really cut it off, 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 cut it off over multiple times, multiple situations, and eventually you will uproot it out of the mind to the point where it won't grow back. You won't experience discontentedness anymore related to that specific craving. And that's where your discontentedness will gradually diminish over time because you've eliminated more and more of the cravings that are producing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions here online. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online. I don't see any more here either. Oh, you have a question? Yes, ma'am. It just takes a second to engage once the light comes on.
I have a question because I don't really understand these things about cutting off.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, this is sort of denial.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, what I think it's healthier for me in this stage of my life is really accepting what I feel, even if it's bad, radically accepting it. Otherwise, if I try to cut it off, as I tried before, because I was afraid of what I was feeling, it becomes bigger and bigger. And it's like that manipulating my inner experience, and I don't want it. So in this period of my life, I really have to open myself to everything, even if it's joy, pain, and then let it go. Otherwise, I get stuck on that. I really dwell on that if I tell to myself, no. And so I would like to understand it better. But and then if I haven't understood what you said, it's like you really have to be mindful, aware of your body sensation. Because before going to the mind, before becoming feeling, it's a sensation of your body, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you said. So this is very interesting and nice to pay attention to your body and feel what you feel. Mm-hmm. But then you can let go. If I don't feel what I feel, I don't think I can let go. So that's why I understood really the question that you were saying about this. Think positive, because if I'm in the traffic and I'm very angry because someone is, I don't know how you say, boom, boom, doing, and I look at the sky and say, beautiful, yes, it's okay, but I don't pay attention to what I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. And it's like betray myself in a way.
Mm-hmm. If you could press this button, and you would stay angry and bitter and harsh and hostile and broken relationships and misery and sorrow and grief and despair the rest of your life. Or you could press this button and experience peace and joy for the rest of your life. Which button would you press? Number 1 or number 2?
Of course, number 2.
Okay. So there you go. So what you're doing right now is you're choosing to press button number 1. That if I'm going to feel these feelings, I'm going to continue to be angry and frustrated the rest of my life because you're allowing the mind to be undisciplined and uncontrolled. But if you're interested in pressing button 2, where you get to the peace and the joy, you're going to need to retrain the mind to uproot the causes and conditions that are producing these feelings. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is how to accomplish that. And it's going to take gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Everybody gets to decide for themselves. It's not pressing a button. It would be wonderful if it was as easy as pressing a button, but it's not. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress to arise the wisdom to be able to understand how to do it. So right now, you're used to dwelling in those feelings, and you see that they don't feel so good. I don't think about them as good or bad. They just don't feel wonderful, right? It's not like, if you could eliminate all of that stuff, you can get so much more time back in your life. You can get so many more rewarding relationships and satisfying relationships, fulfilling relationships. It's no fun sitting around being bored and lonely and stressed and anxiety and being agitated and annoyed. It's very painful. And that tends to be the motivation for people to choose to walk towards the peace and joy. But for each person, it's a personal choice. Would you like to press button number 1 or button number 2? And you got to decide for yourself. If you allow your mind to keep dwelling in those feelings, they'll keep reoccurring over and over and over again. But if you'd like to understand how to get liberated from that, so you can get to the peace and joy, the Buddha's teachings are there for you to help you learn how to do that. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next piece here, which is helping you to understand the first 3 of the 5 hindrances and the solutions as well. So the first hindrance is called central desire. Central desire is a mental object that's in the mind. It's a fetter. It's also a hindrance. What this is how the mind has this longing, yearning, wanting things to be permanently pleasing all the time. There's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, this longing, yearning. If you've ever been to the mall and you saw a brand new pair of shoes and you were like, brand new pair of shoes. Yes, 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 yes. Oh, I can't wait to get those shoes. Or maybe a new phone or a new computer or a new set of clothes or new jewelry. Or maybe it's a boyfriend or girlfriend or a new house or a new car. The mind's like, if I just get that thing, then everything will be perfect in my life. I just need to get that thing. And the mind chases after it. That's what central desire is. It's longing, yearning. It's trying to please the senses. The mind wants things to be permanently pleasing through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. So let me give you some examples. If you're walking down the street and you see a parent walking with their young child holding hands, you might be like, that's so warming. That's so lovely. Look at mom and dad walking with their child. Oh, that's so wonderful. But now you walk and you turn and look down the next street and you see a parent slap their child across the face. That might be disagreeable to you, where the first one was agreeable to you and you got all those pleasant feelings based on the condition of this parent holding the hand of their child. But now, because of impermanence, not every single parent treats their child wonderful. I'm not saying the way the world should be. I'm sharing with you the way the world is. That because of the universal truth of impermanence, that you're going to see these kinds of things occasionally, perhaps, where if your mind craves permanence, where you only want to see permanently agreeable things, you'll get pleasant feelings when you see the first situation, and the second situation, you'll get painful feelings. Or here's another example. Say you're at a red light and someone pulls up next to you with some music that you have a craving for, and you're like, oh man, yeah, that's my jam. Yeah, let's go. Come on, let's dance. Oh, that's some amazing music. Yeah, so happy, so excited, right? It's because of your craving, your longing, your yearning, you hear a certain sound, and now you get so excited, right? And you get those pleasant feelings. But then you move to the next red light and someone pulls up to you with music that you don't like. You don't want to hear this sound. But this sound is coming into the ear that you find disagreeable. And now you're angry, you're frustrated, you're irritated, you're annoyed. This is because of your central desire. It's not the music. The music is just a sound. But it's the mind craving and longing and yearning for a particular sound. And it only finds this sound to be pleasing. And when it hears something opposite of that, then it finds it displeasing. And now you're frustrated, angry, or annoyed. The same thing's happening with odors. There's certain odors you find pleasing. Maybe perfume, cologne, flowers, I don't know, maybe different things. And then you walk down the street, you smell the sewer, and this is displeasing or disagreeable to you. And now you became frustrated or irritated or annoyed. Then there's certain flavors that hit the tongue. Same thing. There's agreeable and disagreeable. You find the agreeable to be agreeable because of your cravings and you get pleasant feelings. Then when you have the disagreeable, you get these painful feelings. And then certain bodily contact. Like say you're walking down the street and you're walking just fine. There's nobody around. You feel quite pleasurable because you have the whole sidewalk to yourself. But now somebody walks past you and they bump into you, and you might find this to be disagreeable, and you get agitated or annoyed or frustrated because somebody bumped into you. This is because the mind's craving something to be permanent, where you can't walk in the world and permanently not have somebody bump into you. It's just not possible. Because of impermanence, somebody's going to bump into you someday. It's going to happen. So if you find this to be agreeable and you're craving to never have someone bump into you, when somebody bumps into you, you'll be irritated or annoyed because of contact with the body. Or maybe say some certain fabric. Maybe you find a certain fabric to be pleasing to the body. And now when you have that fabric, you have those pleasant feelings. But when that fabric isn't there, or you have some other fabric, maybe you're discontent, you're experiencing the frustration or agitation or annoyance. So the same thing's happening with the body. And then you have the mind itself. The Buddha describes the mind as the sixth sense space. The mind is sometimes thinking about the past, maybe pleasurable things or painful things that happened in the past. And now in the present moment, you're experiencing either pleasure or pain in the present moment. Maybe if you were really rich and wealthy in the past, and now you don't really have much money, maybe you might be frustrated or annoyed because you don't have that money. Or maybe there was something very pleasurable in the past that you want to be repeated again now in the present moment, and you're kind of angry or frustrated because of something in the past. This is the mind. You don't have any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or the body. It's just what's going on in the mind itself, that this is a sixth sense space based on something in the past. And you can have the same thing for the future as well, where the mind is having anticipation of something that may or may not happen in the future. Maybe on your way to Thailand, 3 months, 6 months before you came to Thailand, you might have got really excited because of just thinking about going to Thailand. This is the mental state of the mind based on this sixth sense base, the mind. But then when you go to the airport and your flight's delayed or you're canceled, you get irritated or annoyed because your mind's craving and longing, yearning, wanting to go to Thailand. So excited about going to Thailand. My plane's leaving at 2 p.m. And if it doesn't leave at 2 p.m., I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to be annoyed. But these planes can't be permanently on schedule. It's not possible. You live in an impermanent world. Planes are going to be late, they're going to be delayed, they're going to be canceled sometimes, right? So if you crave permanence, when you get what you want, you'll get pleasant feelings. When you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. So sensual desire is a hindrance because, for example, say you have a sensual desire for a particular flavor, like beer or wine or something like this, and now you're drinking beer and wine and you have that sensual desire, and this beer and wine is producing heedlessness in the mind. It's producing these pleasant feelings. Well, if you're clinging and holding on to that sensual desire through the tongue, you might not be willing to let go of that beer and wine that's causing intoxication. And how could you produce mindfulness or awareness of mind if your mind is intoxicated? So as long as you hold on to this sensual desire, and then thus the object of beer or wine or something else, your mind's not going to be able to experience enlightenment because you're still forming your inner feelings based on some condition. If I have beer and wine, I'll be happy. If I don't have it, I'll be frustrated or agitated. If I have sex, you'll be happy, you'll be excited. But if you don't have it, you'll be agitated or annoyed or frustrated, right? This is the central desire that's hindering the mind from being able to experience the permanent peace and permanent joy, because it's basing its inner feelings on some desire that it has, some contact that it wants through these six sense bases. So there's a solution for this. You can eliminate your craving, desire, attachment with breathing mindfulness meditation, where you eliminate the longing and yearning. So that meditation we did this morning, the goal isn't to eliminate your thoughts. The goal is that when your mind moves off the breath, that you notice that it's moved off the breath. And then you're able to cut it off and let it go. You let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. So if 20, 30, 50 times during your meditation, you had to cut off and let go and bring the mind back to the breath, this is really good for your mind, extremely good for your mind, because your mind wants to hold on. It wants to hold on to things permanently. It's craving permanently agreeable contact through the six sense bases. And if you can train the mind to let go in meditation, then in daily life, you can do the same thing. Because when you're walking through the mall and you see that brand new pair of shoes and your mind's like, oh, I just got to have that brand new pair of shoes. Oh, I got to get it. I got to get it. I got to get it. Oh, I want that so badly. If you understand what craving, desire, attachment's going to do, is you're going to get your pleasant feelings, but then you're going to end up in the painful feelings. Because when you lose your shoes, when somebody steals your shoes, when they get damaged or destroyed, you're going to experience painful feelings. So there's no harm in buying shoes. The craving, desire, attachment isn't the object. It's not the shoes. It's the way the mind's longing and yearning for the shoes. So when you see your mind's longing and yearning for something, you can learn how to restrain the mind and pull it back, where you can then obtain the things that you need in life without craving, desire, attachment, without these wants and expectations. You can learn to enjoy things without actually craving, desiring, and being attached to them. Rather than having conditioned feelings, you can just learn how to enjoy things based on wise decision making, certain things that you need rather than your cravings, desires, attachments. So breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to let go, let go, let go. So that in daily life where you have mindfulness, that your mind's longing, yearning, and pulling towards something, you can restrain it and pull it back. And more, you can train your mind to let go. So say, for example, you're going to buy a brand new mobile phone. And maybe you think it's a craving and you're not sure. So you go to the store and you're like longing, yearning, you're really wanting this new mobile phone. Well, you can go and look and then see if you can train your mind to walk out of the store and you're not going to get the mobile phone. See if you can maintain your contentedness. Do that 3, 4, 5, 6 times to see, can I go look at the phone and leave and not buy it? Right? And maybe do that over a period of weeks. And then maybe the 4th, 5th, 6th week, you go into the mobile phone store and you buy the phone. These are the kinds of things that you need to do in order to get to enlightenment. It's not just meditating. You can't just meditate your way to enlightenment. There's other things you need to do. You need to kind of test the mind and put it in situations to see if it's truly craving something. Because if you go to the mobile phone store and you can look at all the mobile phones, you can look at them, you can check all the features, and you can walk away and maintain your contentedness and joy, then there's most likely not a craving there. And you'd like to kind of challenge the mind and test it in that situation. And if you do that a few times and you know that your mind is just as peaceful with the phone or without the phone, then you might be comfortable to go ahead and buy the phone. So that then when your phone breaks, when you lose it, when you misplace it, your mind won't be shaken up by it. But if you're attached to your phone, the phone isn't the problem. The problem is inside the mind. It's the craving, the longing, the yearning. So it's trying to hold on to this phone, wanting it to be permanent. So when you misplace it, your mind might be shaken up. Or if it breaks, you might be angry or frustrated. Or if somebody steals it, you might be angry or frustrated. But you can have a mobile phone and just not be attached to it. This is what the mind needs to learn how to do so that it can eliminate its central desire. So it's breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity where you're giving and you're sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation. This is what's going to help you to be able to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. Because with craving, desire, attachment, the mind will be selfish. It'll hold on to things very tightly. It won't want to share. So when you're giving and sharing, practicing generosity without any expectation of anything in return, this is what helps your mind to let go. And now your cravings, desires, attachments can diminish over time as you gradually train your mind. And then you do what's called guarding the doorways of discontentedness. The doorways are your 6 sense bases. Anytime your mind's ever been angry or frustrated or irritated, you can trace it back to one of these doorways. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind. You can think about any situation you've ever been irritated, annoyed, frustrated, even those conditioned pleasant feelings. It was something you saw, it was something you heard, something that you smelled, something you tasted, something that came in contact with the body, or some thought going through the mind. This is what you would like to learn how to do, is guard these doorways where you know that if your mind experiences contact through the 6 sense bases, if you have a craving, it's going to produce discontentedness. So for example, I was at one time giving up coffee because I knew that the caffeine was causing the mind to be excited and shaken up. So I was deciding that I was going to let go of coffee. So I was gradually kind of moving the mind away from coffee. So I'd go 2 or 3 days without a coffee and then I'd drink one. I'd go a week or 2 without a coffee and then I'd drink one. I'd go 3 or 4 or 5 weeks without a coffee and then I'd drink one. And this is how you gradually move the mind away from it. In that impermanence, the mind doesn't even notice it. Well, I got to about 8 weeks of having no coffee. And I was like, sweet, I don't have this craving anymore. This is wonderful. Starting to get a little bit excited that I eliminated a craving, right? Well, I was walking down the street and the smell, this odor came out of the coffee shop, and I caught it in my nose, and I was like, oh, coffee. And I started going into the coffee shop, and I'm waiting in line, and I'm like, why am I doing this? I've got 8 weeks of time. I haven't been drinking a coffee. I know if I drink this coffee, I'm going to have headaches. I'm going to be laying in bed. I'm not going to be able to do what I'd like to do. I'm standing there talking to myself while other people are ordering, trying to convince myself not to get this coffee. But then the lady, she was like, what would you like? Iced coffee, please. All right. I ordered my coffee. I got my coffee. I sat down at the table, took a couple of sips, maybe a third or a half of the coffee. And I was like, I'm done with this stuff. And I threw it away, and I haven't drank coffee since, right? That was like 5 or 6 years ago, right? So you might notice that these doorways are going to get, arise your craving. So even 8 weeks of no coffee, boom, I got that odor, which was a pleasant odor for me. I found it agreeable, and boom, I was pulled right into the coffee shop. It was decisions that I was making, but this sensual desire can hold you back. You need to be able to restrain the mind and discipline the mind in these kinds of situations. So this is sensual desire. You need to guard those doorways. So what I did from that point forward is when I saw the coffee shop coming, I would switch to the other side of the street. And I did this for a period of time until I fully eliminated my craving. Now, students sometimes invite me to coffee shops, and I go there and sit down with them, and they would like to talk to me about certain things and ask questions about things. I just order a smoothie or order water or something like that. It doesn't, there's no craving there. So even when I smell coffee, it's like, wow, that's an interesting smell, but it doesn't arise any craving because the craving's gone. It's completely been exhausted. I know that there's no more craving for coffee because I haven't had one for so long. It's just not even an interest because I know what that's going to do to the head. I'm going to experience headaches. I'm going to experience an excited mind. I'm not interested in that. So what I needed to do for a period of time is to guard these doorways. Is I needed to switch to the other side of the street, and that was guarding the mind, guarding those doorways. But then eventually when the craving was extinguished, now I can go anywhere and anywhere because I don't have that craving anymore. Number 2 is ill will. What ill will is this is anger, hatred, hostility, bitterness, aggression, resentfulness, frustration, irritation, annoyance. This is a hindrance to your enlightenment, because with central desire in your mind, you'll get those pleasant feelings when you get what you want. But when you don't get what you want, you'll get angry and frustrated and bitter and harsh. And it might come out through your intentions, your speech, and your actions towards other people. And you'll damage your relationships. This is what we've done in the past in the unenlightened state. That's what you do, is you damage your relationships due to your central desire, your craving. You want people to do things a certain way. And if they do it that way, you'll get happy. But if they don't, you'll get angry or frustrated. This ill will arise, and then you'll become unskillful in your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So as long as that ill will is in there, it's going to hinder you from being able to experience the peace and the joy, because you're going to be putting out this hostility and bitterness, and it's going to be coming back to you. This is why if you're harsh and bitter and hostile in your relationships, you probably have people that are bitter and harsh and hostile to you sometimes, because that's what you're putting out. That's what's coming back to you. So in order for you to experience something different, you're going to need to train your mind. Sometimes we think the way to get to a peaceful life is everyone else has to change around us. And when they change, maybe you'll decide, okay, maybe I'll change. But that's not the way that this works. The way that you get to peace and joy is you got to train your own mind. So I grew up at one time where my mom was very bitter and harsh and hostile, and I was too, because that's what I learned growing up. But eventually I trained my mind with loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life, where I started doing the meditation to rewire the mind, to be loving and kind, having this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And then in my intention, speech, and actions, I could be more loving and kind with mom. Where in the past, when she would be bitter and harsh and hostile with me, I'd be bitter, harsh, and hostile right back. Or sometimes I'd be the one who instigated it and started it, right? She would pick up the rubber ball of anger and throw it around. I would pick it up and throw it around. around. She would pick it up and throw it around. It was like fireworks. But then slowly but surely, I decided I was going to do something different. So I started training my mind with loving kindness meditation and then practicing loving kindness through my intention, speech, and actions. And the Buddha gives you guidance of how to do this. So now when my mom would be talking to me on the phone and she would be bitter, harsh, and hostile, instead of being bitter, harsh, and hostile back, which just keeps it going on, I would say, you know, Mom, our relationship is much more important to me than arguing. I know in the past I've argued with you and that's what I've done, but I'm choosing not to do that anymore. I'm going to get off the phone right now and let you think about what you just said. I love you. We'll talk another time. And I'd get off the phone. And then I'd wait 3 months or so, give her some time to think about what she just did and how she acted. And even though I did that in the past, I was letting her know I'm choosing not to do that anymore. So that way she could choose not to do that anymore. So over a period of time, her mind improved, my mind improved, that by the time she died in 2017, there was no problems whatsoever. For many, many years, we didn't have any harsh words between us. So it's loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness through your intentions, your speech, and your actions that's going to change and transform your mind. Sometimes people think loving kindness meditation is to train other people and change other people. There's nothing on this path to enlightenment that is to change other people. Everything on this path to enlightenment is to train your own mind. And by you training your own mind, becoming more loving and kind, you'll see the people around you will be more loving and more kind. And you'll notice this in your life. So you can transform this ill will with loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life. If your mind continues to hold on to the ill will, you won't experience enlightenment because you'll just keep being bitter, harsh, and hostile. And your mind's not going to be peaceful and joyful. And you're going to have broken relationships in your life over and over and over and over again. Then there's something called complacency. What this is the dullness, the lethargic, the lack of motivation. If you read some old translations from different translators, they might refer to this as sloth and torpor. This is a very old phrase, and I just put it in here because some people have read old translations, and just connecting to what I'm sharing here is this complacency, is it's this dullness, this lethargic, this lack of motivation, lack of enthusiasm, lack of willingness to do something or initiative. You may have that at different times in your life. You might feel dull and lethargic, just like to sit around and do nothing for days and days and days and days. Of course, even as an enlightened being, you're going to rest and relax sometimes, but you'll be able to sustain your energy as an enlightened being. You won't feel exhausted and tired. The enlightened mind gets sleepy where you need to sleep, but you won't feel exhausted and tired. When you have craving, when you have this central desire, it's a burden to carry this around. You'll go out into the world and some days you'll be like, oh, this was a great day. I had such a great day. It was wonderful. But other days you're like, oh my gosh, this was a horrible day. I feel so exhausted. This is because you didn't get what you wanted. You know, those painful feelings that you experience, is very exhausting to experience those, right? The frustration, the anger, the bitterness, it's very exhausting to experience those. So you might notice this complacency coming in, this dullness, this lethargic condition. But by the time you get to enlightenment, there's sustainable energy all throughout your day, where your mind doesn't go in this excited state, you don't go in this depressive state. You can just maintain your energy throughout the day where you don't get tired and exhausted. So this complacency, whenever you see this coming into the mind where there's dullness and lethargic, you're going to need to arise the enlightenment factors of investigation, energy, and joy. We just talked about those, right? So you investigate the teachings of the Buddha, you read them, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, do a little bit of reading. These books are perfectly suited for that. You're not interested in reading an hour or two. You know, this is a lot to digest. It's kind of like taking a big bite of pizza. It would be hard to chew that and digest it. You'd like to take a little bite and a little bite and a little bite, and then that's going to help you to easily digest it. So 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, you do a little bit of reading each day. You do some meditation 2 or 3 times a day, building up your practice, and slowly but surely, you will eliminate your complacency. But you might notice at different times your mind does become complacent. So that's where you need to arise the investigation, the energy, which is the initiative and willingness to do something, the enthusiasm, the exact opposite of complacency. And this is where you'll see the joy, because it's not joyful to sit around and be dull and lethargic. Your mind just feels lackluster. And it's like, God, I just feel so icky. right? So you would like to come out of that, maintain your energy throughout your day. And if you get rid of things like caffeine, that's why you need to get rid of caffeine. If you haven't done that yet, by getting rid of caffeine, your mind will be able to develop the natural energy. Right now might not be the time that you're ready to do that, but at some point, if you decide to let go of your caffeine, instead of relying on a substance to lift you up, which means you're just going to crash after that, instead you can build in the mind the natural energy to sustain your energy through the course of your day. So investigating the teachings, arising the energy and the joy, this is what's going to bring your mind out of that complacency. Because if you're complacent and you're not willing to learn from the books, from a teacher, talk with a teacher to get personal guidance, it's going to hinder you. It's going to obstruct you. That complacency is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. If you're complacent, that you're not interested in meditating and you don't meditate, it'll hinder you from getting to enlightenment. The Buddha, when he talks about complacency, he takes it all the way to this point. He says, essentially, if you're walking down the street or if you're laying in bed or something like this, and you have an unwholesome thought that arises in your mind and you do nothing about it, he says you're complacent, right? You haven't taken action to address this. So he says, even when you're falling asleep at night or you're waking up in the morning and you're noticing your thoughts starting to invade you and you have an unwholesome thought, if you allow that thought to persist, then you're complacent. So to fully eradicate complacency, you need to be willing to take action. So you're walking down the street and you notice you're starting to judge other people and you're starting to look down on them. Cut that off. Let it go. Don't allow your mind to do that. And more, it won't do that. But if you allow the mind to just sit there and judge other people and put yourself above other people and look down on them, it's going to keep doing it. So you need to eliminate complacency all the way to the point where you just notice with your mindfulness, the mind is judging somebody else, looking down on them. Cut that off and let it go. Or you're waking up in the morning and your thoughts start invading you. Cut that off. Or if you're going to sleep at night and you're having certain intrusive thoughts, cut that off. And more as you meditate, you'll be able to do that more and more easily. So any questions on any of these three, sensual desire, ill will, or complacency? For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Oh, Steve's got a question. Okay. I didn't know if you're making your way to the bathroom or what you're doing.
Well, thank you, David. So in all of those three there, sensual desire, ill will, complacency, as you're learning, obviously, beginning of the process, invariably, so, the bodily sensation and the feeling, mental object. And, sometimes if you're not trained enough, you'll act on it. Mm-hmm. I'm aware that I'm getting angry. I am angry. Stuff it. I'm going to yell at this person and get it out. Mm-hmm. And then with the degree of self-awareness, you're aware that you're doing that. And of course, with the degree of self-awareness, you're aware that that was an unwise thing to do. Mm-hmm. So depending on one's, background, conditioning or previous, religious training, whatever, that can, from my experience, for me, often lead to a period of guilt, shame. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy, et cetera, until eventually you sort of got to, start again, meditate, da-da-da. So I think it's, yes. So comment on the value of that interim period of beating yourself up. Is it a waste of time? Does it serve any purpose? Better to just let it, So yeah, the classic, take anger or sensual desire. Just every day, I can, I didn't quite catch it. Mm-hmm. What do I do? You just start again?
Yeah, so you're going to have plenty of missteps on your way to enlightenment. There's no such thing as like sitting down and learning a bunch of things and then immediately implementing them. The mind has been conditioned to have these pollutions for so long, not just this life, but many previous lives as too, which you can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But the mind's been conditioned this way for so long that it's going to experience missteps on the path to enlightenment. You can't be perfect through 1 day of training, 1 week of training, 1 month of training, even 1 year of training. You're not going to be able to be perfect. So whenever you have a misstep, instead of blaming other people, which is what the mind usually does in the unenlightened state, it looks for somebody to blame. Who caused this? This is the ego in that craving, desire, attachment. Instead, what the Buddha is teaching you is to look inward and be introspective and reflective. And where you're having difficulties doing that, that's where you come visit your teacher, either online through Zoom or send a private message or come talk with me. You say, hey, this is a situation that occurred. This is what I'm experiencing. I feel like I've learned these couple of things, but is there anything else that you see that I could have learned to gain more wisdom so that I can improve this situation in the future? So you use each situation to cultivate your wisdom, so then you're less likely to experience that same situation again. Because if you run away from the situation or you just feel guilty or shameful, you're not cultivating the wisdom to overcome that in the future. So the Buddha teaches, don't shrink back from the struggle. That when you're struggling, that means your mind just lacks wisdom. Where you're feeling guilty and shameful, you're just lacking wisdom. And you need to turn that in and harness it to being introspective and say, what can I cultivate here that's going to help me to overcome this in the future? You're accomplishing 2 things. It's called moral concern and moral wrongdoing. What moral wrongdoing is where you understand what's wise and unwise. You need to cultivate that on the path to enlightenment through understanding the teachings, learning, reflecting, and practicing. You learn the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. And you start learning what is wise and it's going to produce wholesome results, and what is unwise, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So you're developing this moral wrongdoing. And then you develop moral concern. What moral concern is now that I know what's wise and unwise, I'm concerned to not do these things so that I'm not making unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results, fully knowing that you will do it because your mind's untrained. And now when you do it, okay, let me back up. I have this concern that I'm not interested in doing unwise things and producing unwholesome results. Let me pull back and let me kind of circle the wagons and figure out what can I do to cultivate wisdom here to learn more about what's wise and unwise. If I need to look at a book or a video, if I need to talk to my teacher, if I need to talk to other members of the community, let me cultivate some wisdom here. So even if you're 10% in the right, so to speak, and somebody else is doing something that's 90% unwise, or even if you're 1% doing something unwise, figure out your 1%. Don't walk away from that. Use that opportunity to figure it out and then cultivate the wisdom so you can overcome that. And some people refer to this as moral guilt and moral shame. I teach it as moral wrongdoing and moral concern. So that's why the guilt and the shame is coming in, is because the mind's craving to be perfect, not realizing that you can't be perfect. You need to eliminate the craving to be perfect, the longing and yearning, and just realize that, hey, this being Steve is a work in progress, and I'm just going to gradually cultivate wisdom. And sure, I'm going to have missteps, but I've got all these tools and all these resources around me, including a teacher, to be able to reach out to. And I've surrounded myself by people that I can reach out to get help and wisdom when I'm struggling and I'm challenged. And now I'll cultivate that wisdom. And each day, each week, each month, I'm just going to get better and better and better at what I'm doing. And that's how you can eliminate your craving to be perfect today. Because realizing that to get to enlightenment, it's not about being perfect today. It's about when you make a misstep today, what do you do next? Do you blame other people, or do you figure out the wisdom to cultivate it and make it better? You got to be able to admit that you're making unwise decisions, see it with clarity, cultivate wisdom, and then move on making wiser and wiser decisions. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one. Sometimes these hindrances feels so deep rooted that you can avoid one but fall into the other. What's your advice in order to break this vicious cycle and search for enlightenment?
So you need the Eightfold Path to be well established. I don't know your background. I don't know what you've studied, but I suspect you probably haven't studied with the original words of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, because even people who consider themselves Buddhist, there's 500 million of those people in the world. very few of them have studied the original words of the Buddha with the Eightfold Path. So you need that on board, because that's what's going to give you the tools and the techniques to train the mind over a consistent long-term period and accumulate the benefits so that you can train the mind more readily, because you're going to experience missteps like what we're talking about here. You're going to experience those. But if you don't have the core foundational teachings of the Eightfold Path underway, these things are only going to have so much benefit. That these are the way to surgically go in and eliminate them. But as you saw with the original words of the Buddha, you need to have the Eightfold Path on board first. So that's where I would suggest that you start. That's why this is the last class of the 7-month program, because I've already taught all these other things. So we're restarting it next week, and imagine you travel so you can tune in through Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, or you can watch the recording if you can't attend live. So there's 2 classes a day that you can take, and with you being in South America, it's probably going to be Saturday night or Sunday morning are the classes for you, or Tuesday morning or Tuesday night and Wednesday morning are the classes. And then where you can't make those, you can watch the recordings, you can read the book, gradually build up your Eightfold Path, and then you can go in and do these things, because you need to be able to have that core central teaching first. And that's where I start students at the very beginning of the program. The very first class next Sunday will be kind of like an introduction, but then the next class after that, 2 weeks from now, we're going to start diving into the Eightfold Path really deeply. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I see Master V has a comment on here. He's saying, thank you so much for the attachment lesson at Wat Tung Yu Academy. I should practice more about the right view so that the global citizens who bound to this temple can get more inspiration to stay here and now and find their own inner peace and soon enlightenment. Welcome to Thailand. So Master V is one of the volunteers here at the temple, and there was something that happened this week, and I went and talked to him and helped him to be able to see more about what was happening and transpiring. So he's just thanking me for those lessons that I shared with him. Okay, so let's move on to the next. Oh, we have Rachel on Zoom. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, David.
Hello.
I have a question on the word complacent. Complacency. You mentioned this word many, many times. I think today I finally start to understand what it means. But my question is, I looked it up in dictionary. I think almost all the dictionary says it is a state that one is pleased or satisfied with one's situation. So it's not kind of it's not kind of like dullness or nostalgia. So I'm wondering, are both meanings used in English, or this meaning like dullness, nostalgia is more commonly used in English regarding this word?
Yeah, I'm not sure which dictionary you're using, but I wouldn't define complacency as satisfied. This is how I would define it here: dull, lethargic, lack of motivation. You might consult some different dictionaries, because of impermanence, different dictionaries are going to describe it different ways. So maybe consult some different sources. But this is how I would describe complacency: is if you've noticed that dull or lethargic, lack of motivation, lack of a willingness to do something, lack of initiative, that's what complacency is, where you're not willing to take action.
So it's a kind of state that one is dispirited, is it?
Did you say someone is dispirited?
Is this similar to complacency?
Yeah, I don't know what that word means 100%, but it sounds to be accurate to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm glad you brought that question up, because I kind of was going to ask you, can you bring more examples on complacency? Because I thought it was something like that. And also going back to sensual and feelings, let's say when you're aware of your body, what you need, and whether it's intuitive or you feel something that gives you a good feeling. I get it, craving attachment the way you don't have it. But let's say chocolate, it feels, it's good. Or you're in a relationship and someone's touching you here and you're like, no, don't touch me there. I don't like it there. I need you to touch me here. Or, give it, So would that be, how would you put that into having needs and okay, this makes me feel good, this doesn't, and also being vocal about it without the other person saying, oh, is impermanent, you're just craving it, or is attachment, or like going back to my other question, let's say let's
do one at a time.
Okay.
Joel. Let's do the first one, which is complacency you asked about. So some more examples is what you asked for. Yes, yeah. So if you were ever sitting around and like, I should really meditate, it's probably a good idea to meditate. Nah, I don't want to meditate. I just want to play on social media. I just want to watch TV, or I want to go outside and play. This is complacency. The mind isn't interested to do something that it otherwise knows would be wise, right? So like you're dull and lethargic, like, we might call it procrastination. That's a word that we use, right? Where we procrastinate about things. Like, you should be washing your clothes, but you just don't wash your clothes. So here, the hindrance that the Buddha is talking about in terms of complacency is related to training your mind. That if you have complacency, or if you procrastinate about training your mind, then you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. You're going to be hindered from getting to enlightenment because your mind isn't willing to meditate and read books and come to the temple and talk to your teacher and take action when you see that unwholesome thought come up, that you don't take action because there's a dullness, there's a lethargic condition, there's a lack of motivation in the mind. So that's why you would like to investigate the teachings, have energy and joy, be like, you know what? Yeah, I do want to keep searching social media, but I realize that's a central desire, and I'm not going to allow the mind to be complacent. You know what? I'm going to cut this off and I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to make that happen. And your mind's like, no, don't go meditate. Keep searching social media. This is so much more fun. You're like, no, I'm going to go meditate. And you go and do it, right? So more and more, when you start seeing the benefits of something like meditating and learning the teachings of the Buddha, and you see the peace and joy coming to the mind, you'll have less and less complacency. You'll get to the point where without a doubt, these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind, an improved condition of life, and the complacency will be eradicated. You'll thoroughly enjoy meditating, where you can enjoy it without being attached to it. All right, so now your central desire question. Can you restate it? Uh-oh, forgot what he said. Okay, well, if you think about it, we can come back to it. That's all right. Just take your time if you think about it.
Yeah, it'll come back.
It'll come back. Yeah, just let me know. Okay. So yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I have a question about the central desire. Mm-hmm. I fully understand that for the five senses that I actually experiences a lot in my daily life, but for example, for the probably man or eyes or nose, it's impermanent, but it's less shorter. But for the body, I sometimes feel that it lasts longer than the other senses. For example, if I feel back pain, and then it may affect my feeling all day. So in terms of that situation, that how we like relieve ourselves or find the inner peace out of those longer, it's impermanent, but it's probably longer factors.
Yeah, so this is where you need the Eightfold Path well underway. There's no there's nothing for me to tell you in 2-minute or 5-minute response that's going to immediately take away your grumpiness and your anger or whatever you're experiencing when you're experiencing that back pain. What's going on is the mind's craving to be permanently comfortable in the body. It doesn't realize that this body is impermanent. Maybe intellectually you understand it, that this body is impermanent. You are going to experience pain here and there, but the mind's still holding on. It hasn't let go. It's not practicing. It still has this central desire. So if you're not doing 2 to 3 meditations for 30 minutes or more per day, you need to gradually build up to that, where you're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation 2 or 3 times per day for 30 minutes or more. You need to practice generosity. I don't know where you are with that, where you're giving and you're sharing more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. There's certain mental discipline that you need to practice. When you're noticing the discontentedness arising, you need to be able to cut it off and let it go. There's other things like moral conduct and other things that you need to be practicing. So then you gradually wear away the cravings, because because those cravings are deeply held. Like the one example I gave about your mom getting in a car accident and on her way to the hospital. Most people have a very deep attachment to their mom, right? And you don't need to eliminate your mom. You don't need to eliminate the relationship. You just need to eliminate the craving for mom to be a certain way, right? And this is going to take time. So you need to gradually build up your eightfold path and dialing in all those 8 factors closer and closer, more and more. So I would also encourage you, because I know that this is your first time here, I haven't met you before, is in the first book, in the videos and the podcast, you can learn the Eightfold Path. You need to bring that up and running so that it will gradually wear away your cravings, desires, attachments, wanting this body to be permanently comfortable, because it's just not possible. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so let's go on to the next 2. The fourth one of the 5 hindrances is called restlessness and worry. This is where the mind is unsettled, kind of anxious. If you're noticing that you sometimes just sit like this, you're kind of bobbing your knee or you're kind of tapping your fingers, this is because of the overactive mind. The mind is the boss. The body's the employee. The body's just following what's going on in the mind. So if you're sitting here shaking your leg or bouncing your fingers or tapping a pencil, this is the body being the employee, but it's following the boss. It's what's going on in the mind. That's the restlessness, the unsettledness in the mind. And then you might have this worry, right? This worry is where you're worried about the world. You're worried about other people. Sometimes people think that it's love. The reason why you're worrying, it's not because of your love, it's because of your craving, desire, attachment. Like my wife and my son, they're not here right now. I don't know where they're at. I'm not worried about them. I know they're out there in the world. They're making wonderful decisions. Whatever they're doing, they're having fun. I have no idea where they're at right now. I'm not worried about them. In a few months, 6 months, I'm going to be flying to Mexico to teach some teachings. Some people invited me to come share some teachings. I'll be gone for about 3 weeks. I'm not going to worry about my wife and my son. I'm not going to be calling them every day, checking in on them, seeing how they're doing. Not because I don't love them. Of course, I love them. I would like to see them be well, but I'm not craving for them to be a certain way. I can be content and joyful with them, but I can also be content and joyful without them. I can be peaceful and joyful. I can be happy with them. I can be happy without them. So here, what restlessness and worry is where the mind's confused, distracted, this restless state of mind, and you're worrying about your own unskillful conduct. This is what you were just talking about. This is a hindrance to your enlightenment. So if you worry about your own unskillful conduct, every single misstep that you have on the path, this is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So you need to harness that as you would like to do well. You would like to cultivate your wisdom. Don't have a craving to be perfect. So if you have certain cravings in your mind, you're going to notice this restlessness and worry coming into the mind. And what you do is when you notice that the mind's overactive and restless, you practice the factors, the enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And you practice singleness of mind, of right concentration, where you're just doing one thing at a time. You might have been taught to multitask. This is a big misunderstanding in the world. In the 1960s, computers came out, and computer chips can multitask because it's a computer chip. It's a hardware. It's a device. It can do multiple processes. So in the 1960s, human beings started thinking that we could multitask too. But your mind can't multitask. You're not able to do more than one thing at a time. Your mind does one thing for 3 to 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then it rapidly cycles to something else. And you do that for 3 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, and then you rapidly cycle to something else. And if your mind bounces around like this all day at work or whatever else you're doing, when you get home, you'll find it hard to be relaxed. You'll have stress and worry and anxiety in the mind. That's what this worry is. It's anxiety. So if you're 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day bouncing around, you're going to notice that your mind has stress, it has anxiety, it has restlessness, it has worry. So you can just do one thing at a time where you handle it, and you'll notice that you're actually more productive. People think when they're multitasking, they're more productive, but you're actually not, because you're making all kinds of mistakes that you got to go back and clean up later. So if you just do one thing really, really well, and you get used to doing it that way, you'll notice that you don't have to go back and clean things up. So this restlessness and worry is uprooted out of the mind, that when you notice it with your mindfulness, you bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. Then there's this hindrance of doubt. What doubt is doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and the ability of them to attain enlightenment. we're not just talking about doubt, like you doubt whether or not you can walk to the store and get something to eat, or you have doubt about your ability to stand up in public speak. That's not what this is. What this hindrance is when you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and their ability to attain enlightenment. You might doubt whether the Buddha existed. You might doubt his teachings. You might doubt the community that you're part of. You might doubt your teacher, or whether I can actually lead you to enlightenment, or some other teacher. You might doubt your own ability to get to enlightenment. Can you even get to enlightenment? You might have doubt about that. Well, the way that you eliminate that doubt is not through blind belief or faith. You eliminate your doubt by investigating the teachings. When you investigate and examine the teachings, you'll uncover the truth through your reflection. You'll be able to see the truth in the teachings more and more. And then when you practice the teachings and you uproot the pollutions out of the mind, you'll have experienced a significant amount of progress over a consistent period of time. You'll get to a point where you have no doubt these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind, because you'll have seen that in situations where you get angry and frustrated in the past, that doesn't happen anymore. And you notice that there's improvement. You'll notice your relationships improving with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your neighbors. You'll notice that you're being more friendly and more kind and more polite, and therefore people are being that way with you more and more and more. So the way that you eliminate this doubt is to cultivate confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to attain enlightenment. But you do that through investigating the teachings. If you investigate the teachings and examine them, you'll see that they're true. This is why you'll never see in the original teachings of the Buddha where he says, just believe me. Just believe me. Never. You will never see that anywhere in his teachings. He says just the opposite. He says, come, investigate my teachings, examine them, because he knows if you dig into his teachings close enough, you're going to discover the truth, and more you'll be able to train your mind to get to enlightenment. But if you have this doubt, which typically people do when they first come onto the path to enlightenment, you will have doubt. I know I did. I had lots of doubt. But you can harness this doubt and turn it into an inquisitive mind. So if you have doubt right now whether these teachings can lead to your enlightenment, harness it. Say, you know what? I do have doubt. Let me roll up the sleeves. Let me sink in my teeth. Let me read these books. They're free. Let me come to the classes. Let me tune into the live streams. Let me watch the recordings or listen to the podcast. Let me uncover this. Let me see if these teachings really truly lead to enlightenment or not. Soak your teeth in, dig in, and that's where you'll eliminate this doubt. And it won't be a hindrance for you. But as long as you have doubt, it will hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So this is the 5 hindrances. Any questions on these? Restlessness and worry or doubt? Let me see if we have any questions online. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So I think I had a couple more things. Yeah, I taught this at the beginning, actually. This was the last thing I was going to teach you guys, which is the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but I taught it to you at the beginning. This is just the slide, that when you first start off, I suggest that you practice mindfulness as awareness of mind. This is observing and understanding what's going on in the mind. You would like to understand these 5 hindrances and be aware of them when they're arising. When you see sensual desire arising, when you see ill will arising, when you see complacency, when you see the restlessness and worry, when you see the doubt arising, you would like to be able to observe that with your mindfulness or awareness of mind, and then apply the right effort to cut that off and let it go. And you can notice it as a bodily sensation, cut it off there. If you don't, it'll become a feeling. It'll start affecting the condition of the mind. And these are all mental objects. These are deeply rooted containers in the mind that you need to uproot. Okay? So what I'll do here with the very last Sunday of the class, I know there's people tuning in that have been studying with me for a while, and those of you guys here, I'll just thank all of you guys. I know some of you guys are here maybe for the first time, so this might sound a little bit strange, but I'd like to thank everybody who's been participating in this group learning program, whether you've been attending live, whether you've been watching the recordings. I'd like to thank everybody for joining to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha, being dedicated and diligent to learning and practicing your teachings. If you've made any offerings to me to support these teachings in terms of your generosity of your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources to help with things like purchasing electricity or water or computers to be able to live stream, or editing a podcast, or helping in any way to support these teachings to come into the world. I'd like to thank everybody. I have deep appreciation for people who are helping me to be able to share these teachings in the world through supporting the work and efforts that I do. So thank you for your generosity. If you've given me a smoothie or a little bit of lunch or a little bit of food here or there, some fruit, I know people have been supporting me in all different kinds of ways. So I'd like to just thank you for your generosity. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to restart this program on Sunday next week. If you'd like to either start from the very beginning, if somebody is just finding out about this program now, or if you've been in this program for a period of time and you'd like to restart it, you can. There's also the option to move into the Pali Canon and English study group, which is on Saturdays. Each Saturday, I teach a 1.5-year program, which is using the original words of the Buddha, which students will typically go from these foundational programs into that program. So if you haven't studied the group learning program once or twice, sometimes people take it multiple times, you may not find that the Pali Canon and English study group is, suited for you, because you need to have a foundation first. But if you feel like you have a foundation from these various programs, you might decide to move into the Pali Canon and English study group now that you've done the group learning program once or twice or 3 times or however many times you've learned. So this Sunday coming up, I'm going to restart from the very beginning of the group learning program. On Wednesday, I'm going to be doing guided meditation with students. I'm going to guide you guys in a breathing mindfulness meditation session. And then I'm going to just open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to the path to enlightenment. So you're welcome to attend here or online. Pleased to help you guys. So perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.